King? Yeah, there we go. Cool. I love the walk-on music and the head mic. I feel like a rock star. It's awesome. Hello. I'm Mike Migliore. Thanks for that introduction. And we're going to talk about AI and customer empathy, individualizing at scale. The title is somewhat different from what you guys have printed because I changed it. I felt like this was more representative of what we'll be talking about today. Customer value. As I run a team that is responsible for making sure that customers use our product, that they stay with us, and ultimately that they spend more money with us over time. And the us in that equation is the Times and Sunday Times of London. So we are Britain's #1 oldest quality and paid for news brand. So we're behind a paywall. This presentation is in 3 acts with a prologue. I'm a huge fan of opera, so this is like the closest I'm ever going to get to writing my own. So in the prologue, I want to talk a little bit about the market and the changing forces that have impacted us. I want to talk about our journey towards data-driven marketing in the first act. In the second act, I want to talk about why we turned to AI and what we did. And then in the third act, I'd like to talk a little bit about how technology has changed our perspective and our culture, and actually what the results of all of our work in AI did for us. So without further ado, let's talk costs and consumers. So I think in the age we live in that we all face a defining challenge, and that is how do we communicate with our customers at cost and at scale. As a marketer, obviously, I'm deeply concerned with this. And it has actually been, the work of my career to think about how do we do this in the right way. I think a great way of understanding this challenge, and I know I'm not the first speaker to do this, but I think a great way of understanding this challenge is to go back to the 1950s. And I think the kind of quintessential example of like what an individualized relationship was your kind of corner shop. So say you'd go to your corner shop and you'd be, you'd know the shopkeeper, they'd know you, they'd probably have your order ready, you'd shoot the breeze a little bit about, the economy or the price of milk or your kids or whatever. But you'd leave knowing that interaction was broadly going to be the same the next time. And that was force of habit. Part of that was the relationship that you had with that shopkeeper. We fast forward to today, and we think about the Times and Sunday Times more broadly, News Corporation, and we think about how do we do this? How, as a business, are we ever going to create relationships with people we're never going to meet? It's not that easy to strike up a conversation, especially when you consider that our competitors continually lowering their prices, and as consumers, we've kind of come to expect that, haven't we? We're very picky as consumers, and ultimately, I think most of us are also very price sensitive. And so, how do we as brands compete with this? In my eyes, as a marketer, I've always thought, well, it has to be about the relationship, and that's in a huge way what we're going to talk about today. So let's explore that a little bit. So. We're talking about cost-effective compromise. So a business can build relationships at scale with consumers, right? We've all experienced this. We've all received that email from a brand. Say, if you're a woman, you've received an email about Viagra. Or if you're a man, you received an email about bikinis. Totally irrelevant. You're probably regretting, why did I take like the 3 seconds to open this? What a waste of my life. I'm never going to get it back. I think a lot of brands, they try and do this at scale, right? So they use the spray and pray method. So they'll spam millions of consumers and hope that some get through. I think a lot of us probably have these relationships, right? Like, not to impugn, hopefully I'm not impugning anyone here, but if you think about telecommunication providers, right? We all have a relationship with our telcos, but it's not very meaningful. It's very transactional. And so I think what I'm concerned with is how do we get to that criteria for meaningless or for meaningfulness and do it cost effectively? It's almost impossible, right? Until you think, oh, well, do you know what we could do? Actually, we could take this group of people over here who probably have the same gender and probably the same income. They make the same amount of money. We could take these people over here who are probably less price sensitive and were on our website more recently, and we'll put them into segments. That's cost effective, right? That's uniting a group of consumers despite their diversity by, say, like one or two characteristics. But it's a compromise. And I think what bothers me about that is, as a marketer, as somebody who has always valued the primacy of an individual kind of one-to-one relationship and of the efficacy of communication that you can get with that, is that it's a mediocre compromise, you know? Especially when you think about the amazing technology that we have available to us in the 21st century. I don't understand why businesses should settle for this. If you think about who am I talking to, what am I going to say, and how am I going to say it, these are the foundations of all great marketing, and stakeholder management for that matter, right? I think if we go back to that example in the 1950s, the reason that was so effective was because the shopkeeper fulfilled all three of those criteria. You know, they knew who they were talking to, they knew what they were going to talk about, they knew how they were going to talk about it, and how often to talk about. And I suppose conversely also what not to talk about, which is implied by that as well. So I think before we go on, it's worth talking about the change in title of this presentation, right? So it used to be putting the personal back into personalization, and I've changed it because I think individualization is not personalization. I think personalization is knowing your name, so dear Mike, you know, and putting that into an email, like demonstrating that. Whereas I think individualization is more about meeting a consumer needs and anticipating those needs, predicting those needs, but with a couple of different dimensions. So knowing what those needs are in terms of what content would they be interested in? And I don't just mean editorial content. I mean, like, if I'm any kind of brand, what should we be talking to them about? How should we be presenting that information in a way that they're going to assimilate and understand? And when should we present it? How frequently should we present it? That's what individualization is. I think good individualization does all of those things for each person as a segment of one. To me, that is CRM Nirvana. It's what we should all be aspiring to as brands. It should be about getting the right content to the right person at the right time in the right format. So that brings us to Act 1, data-driven customer marketing. It talks a little bit about how we did this before AI and kind of our journey towards that. This isn't going to work. This was our latest ad, which kind of explained a little bit about the Times and Sunday Times, but unfortunately, we'll have to skip it. So, Times and Sunday Times. We have a distinguished and respected product. It's quality content. The Times was founded in 1785, so 10 years after America became America, and 4 years before the French Revolution. It's an organization, as you can imagine, that has seen dramatic changes in consumer behavior over the years. But I think arguably the most dramatic has been what have happened in the last 20, right? Publishers and media companies were some of the first to take advantage of the scale offered by the internet, and in turn also then some of the first firms to be impacted by some of its negative consequences. And so I think we've managed to not only survive but excel. You know, we are one of the only news brands in the UK that are in growth. We now have over half of our customers are digital customers, so we're making that transition from, you know, a wholesale print business to a direct-to-consumer business very effectively. And close to my heart, because it's a metric I look after, in the past 24 months, we've delivered a 10 percentage point reduction in digital churn rates by using our data ethically and effectively. And efficiently, which I think is what that says, yeah. So how do we do this? So basically, we were the first news organization in the world to put up a paywall. We did this in 2010, and on that day, we became a consumer-facing business, a direct-to-consumer business. Basic infrastructure for CRM and digital marketing followed shortly after. And we launched a sort of classic retention operation in the call center, and also a sort of digital marketing infrastructure shortly following that. We realized that very quickly, in fact, that we were saving about half of people who would call up and cancel, but that wasn't enough. That like saves, they weren't going to save us. We had to be more proactive. And the way we were going to be more proactive was by using data more effectively. So using data, imbuing it at every stage in our customers' journey with us, well before they had ever really even reached point of sale. And so over time, we've built and rebuilt our CRM programs, testing and learning, focusing on data-driven segmentation to enable this relevant customer marketing. I'm not sure if this is actually... Oh. All right, we'll skip it. I think it's passed. So customer marketing and customer experience for us. So after about 5 years, long time, we managed to build out this customer lifecycle, award-winning customer lifecycle. My boss would have me say. So it's all about being proactive and all about being reactive, but ultimately still knowing who we're talking to, what we were going to say at what points, and how we were going to say it. And so we experienced some pretty impressive results off the back of this. So we found that churn was declining, net growth was increasing, and ARPU was remaining stable. This more kind of sophisticated approach to data management and behavioral-based segmentation drove the success of customer marketing as a department, and our and retention, the retention operating model more broadly. And we found that this was really effective because habit was delivering our highest return. So there's a clear relationship between our activity and churn reduction because we were talking to the right people about the right content at the right time. We were, of course, for our sins, using segments. But that's fine because we still consider segments to be best practice. And at the time, it was working for us. And like all great business people, I'm a pragmatist. Our company is pretty pragmatic, so that made sense. We found that actually what's really interesting, I'll explain this. This is the laser. So over here, we've got low engaged customers, and over here we've got high engaged customers. And this line here is our churn rates. This is our whole customer base. So basically you can see that the more engaged you are, the less likely you are to leave. But I think that's it's not really like groundbreaking information, like the more somebody uses a product, the less likely they are to stop. What is groundbreaking about this are these colored bars, which actually speak to how long a customer has been with us. And what they're basically equally proportionate in each segment, or in each group, which says that it's not how long you've been with us, it's how quickly we can build a habit with you that makes you valuable, that makes you see value in the brand, that makes you see value in the product. So we chased this pretty hard, and like all good businesses, we were rewarded with higher targets, or in our case, lower targets, because we're talking about churn. And I think the saying here is very relevant, so no good deed goes unpunished, right? So we realized that with segmentation, we were reaching a point of diminishing marginal returns. So the life cycle wasn't having the same impact that it used to. We were, we needed a step change. We needed something that was going to, start bringing that incremental value back to our business. And so, that's why we eventually we turned to AI and James, our digital butler. So James was a collaborative project between Twipe Digital Publishing, who are a Belgian-based company with expertise in AI and digital platforms. Great guys, should check them out if you've got the time. And also ourselves, plus the Google Digital News Innovation Fund. So that brings us to Act 2. In good time, I'm glad to see. So talking about AI-driven customer marketing. So I think you'll probably be able to see where I'm going with this. The vision for James was to meet this defining challenge I spoke about with real gusto. To do something that, I can't think of really any brands that do it very well. And even the ones that immediately spring to mind, Amazon and Netflix, still get it wrong. And so what we wanted to do was to really create sustainable value for our customers in the business, right? So to deliver better, individualized customer experiences, stronger growth, and unprecedented levels of operational efficiency, all through machine learning. So more relevant content to the right people at the right time to demonstrate value. So a note here on product strategy. I mean, for those of you who are not familiar with the Times of London and the Sunday Times, we have an edition-based publishing model. So it means that we're not constantly publishing new articles every minute of the day like the BBC or similar news brands. Our goal is to kind of produce a well-considered, well-thought-out edition, and we do this 4 times a day, so that we're right as opposed to right now, if that makes sense. But what James would do would distribute all the relevant content from that edition to our customer base at the right time in the right format. We chose also for our 12-month proof of concept, we chose email as the primary channel because it was cost effective and it was proven to work in the building and creation of habits. So to bring this to life a little bit, you can see here, so basically we've got our edition across all devices. It's feeding into James, and then James is distributing each edition's content according to learned consumer preference, or later predictions of when we moved into contextual bandits and next best actions. So you can see here 2 different formats, different content, sent at different times to 2 very different types of people. As we pursued this project, we realized, this idea that personalization is personal, which sounds really trite at first, but actually, if you think about what I'm saying, like, it's all about. We realized that James is a means of demonstrating our shared empathy for our consumers. It wasn't enough, I think, to just pursue this new technology. It had to be coupled with cultural change, and I suppose it's a constant reminder of the diversity of our consumer base and the respect that diversity demands of us as brands if we want to create valuable, sustainable relationships with our customers. As a premium news product, we're never going to win on price, So we have to win on value. And I think it's something that, more brands could think about more frequently. So, what's under the hood? What did we actually do? So we established that there were likely 4 factors that influence customer behavior for marketing. Content, what are we saying? Format, how are we saying it? Time, so when is the customer going to see it? And frequency, so how often do we need to say it? So if you go back to our kind of standards of marketing, who are we talking to? What are we going to say? How are we going to say it? And we created algorithms across all 4 of these dimensions. We tested them on our consumer base quickly, failing fast, learning quickly, and we did, thank you Netflix, we did borrow the interleaving principle from them, which is essentially a means of testing the efficacy of your algorithms, but more effectively and more quickly than traditional A/B testing. So, just to bring this to life a little bit, so this is these are 4 different formats that we were using in our tests. So our kind of standard format was this one over here, and then we tested these as well to see which one was going to be most effective for the folks that we were targeting. So, who thinks A was the most effective one? Show of hands. Okay, none of you. Okay. Cool, 1. B. All right, about 30%. C. Maybe 15%. And D. Okay, cool. And then a bunch of you who didn't vote. Cool. This is my first time in Finland, by the way. It's really interesting. It was D. It was the one without any images. It kind of just goes to show you that it's a great kind of corrective to this idea that the business knows best. That actually often we don't, and AI can help us kind of relearn how to be empathetic. How to actually to get to that, to unlock that value for the right customers, for all customers. Sorry. To really get into the detail a little bit here, so. We had, basically you've got inputs, you've got all sorts of different things, like who is the customer, how recent a customer are they, how long have they been with us, what's their engagement like, what's their propensity to churn, all sorts of things. This is put into a model which is then where we're calculating the probability of clicks in this case. Then it moves into our multi-arm bandit, chooses which format to use for a user. And then, of course, the coolest thing about this, which drives that operational efficiency, is adapting to what the user does or doesn't do. So I've spoken a little bit about culture. So how do we do this? Basically, none of this had been possible without the support of a great team that powered through the challenges of kind of cross-continental collaboration. So this was, it was a global project. We had a team in London, we had a team in Barcelona, we had a team in Bangalore in India, and we had our colleagues in Belgium. We worked agilely. We'd test, learn, iterate in 2-week sprints. We'd fail fast, work fast. We would hold daily stand-ups via video. And we would offer results quarterly up to a steering group. I suppose if I think about culturally what drove our success, working agilely was one. The second thing that drove us was that we would work cross-functionally and we would work as kind of a geniocracy. So everybody had kind of a valid opinion of like a flat structure in a sense. And as long as what they were saying was backed up by data, then it's fine. Then let's have that conversation. The third thing was autonomy. So, talking to like my boss and our senior leadership was let us do our thing, and we'll let you know when there's an update. And this worked incredibly well. It set us up for the right kind of agile journey. And we innovated fast, basically from the start of the project in July all the way through and beyond. James was getting bigger, better, smarter, more efficient. And this is all down to how we were working, right? But most importantly, we were driven by data. Lots of data. I kind of I'm in this like love-hate relationship. I love the term data evangelist, and sometimes I think it's so wanky, but it is true. You have to be data-driven if you're going to be successful in this world, in our current corporate world. One of the previous presenters talked about data as oil. I don't know if I'd say it's oil, but it is the currency with which we all trade, and the most valuable companies in 10 years are going to be the ones that are effectively and efficiently using their data to drive value for consumers. I think I really love this. So we were really rigorous about the agile aspect of this. We had 250 stand-up calls, 30 remote sprint demo meetings, 5 face-to-face kind of workshops and retrospects, and it led to great team synergies. I think if you look at some of the things on this slide, you've got crazy, fun, challenge, pioneer. I think it speaks to like the investment that the whole team had in it, which was a key driving force behind why this has been so successful, which you're going to hear about just how successful it was in a second. Obviously, we've got a great vibe going here. So great, in fact, that the Queen was there. It's our sister brand, the Sun. So finally, I wanted to talk about excellent timing. Yes, empathy-driven profits. So all of our experiments have changed us as a company, but ultimately, you don't get the license to experiment if you don't deliver, right? So. What did we deliver? So we drove engagement. And basically what you're seeing on this graph is people who have clicked and opened, people who took no action, and people who opted out. Obviously, the trend is going in the right direction. The other trend that's worth pointing out here is those who opted out, which is actually steadily increasing in the early part of the experiments, but then levels off, which becomes important in a moment. So if I think about all of this kind of coalescing into what did we really do. So 14 million emails is what we sent over a 12-month period. We created 6 propositions. So a daily briefing, cartoon of the day, top commenting, and top shared. Obviously, we had to set ourselves some limits. Can't do the whole blue sky in 12 months. But in the sense of getting the right content to the right person at the right time, we felt like these were sort of the 6 best formats of doing that in. And as long as the content was as relevant as possible, then we still should have seen impactful results. And we did. So we created 11 models. They were all live and evaluated. These include time, content, next best action, and they were being driven by contextual bandits. And now, if I had to drum roll, So 70% of our subscribers interacted with James. And for us, I think this says that AI can distribute content effectively, and it can do so in these dimensions of not just content, which has obviously been around for a very long time, but in terms of timing, in terms of format, and in terms of frequency. 15% of customers opted out. Why am I telling you about this? Why am I proud of this? Because I think it just plays into what I've been saying all along here, is that you have to have empathy for who you're talking to. You have to remember who you're talking to. Because otherwise, you're going to alienate them, and that's how you actually drive churn, right? So you don't need to contact everyone. Some readers will already have habits established, and they're fine. They're doing fine, as one of my favorite comedians would say. The biggest impact that we saw was for low and medium engaged subscribers. So, traditionally, the people that are the hardest to retain. But we were able to create habits for these folks by being able to communicate with them more effectively and to drive, a more sustainable vision of value. We reduce time to market. So this is that point around operational efficiency. And for any of you who are in kind of, customer-facing roles, I think you can all relate to kind of the challenge of having to wait for, campaign effectiveness analysis, for having to wait for creative from agencies that you work with. In a marketing role, this is kind of like bread and butter, but occasionally working in a large matrix-style organization can bring with it all sorts of bureaucratic problems. With James, we don't have those anymore, because the machine learning algorithm is learning in real time and then adapting. And I suppose from a secondary point of view, these sort of test, learn, iterate can work within a large matrix-style organization. I think you hear a lot of talk these days about the effectiveness of cross-functional teams and whether or not it can work. I think it can, fully endorsed here, and we have the results to prove it. The biggest result, though, was that we saw a 49% decrease in churn amongst our test group. So I think if that says pretty loud and clear to me that individualization provides a powerful return on investment. It's worth doing. It's worth, talking about like customer empathy. If you sit down with somebody like your CFO, and they're gonna say to you like, "What are you talking about?" But this is what I'm talking about. Customer empathy drives revenue, drives profit. 49% less churn observed for people who interacted with James. And ultimately, don't get me wrong, we invested quite a lot of money in this up front, so it was a CapEx investment, capital expenditure, but ultimately in the long term, it will mean that we have lower operating expenditure because we kind of took this leap. And I'm hoping that, many of you in the audience will be more open to taking the leap now that you've heard that we did it. So I spoke, about the, traditional content recommendation, which has been around a very long time. Our traditional content recommendation model, which was only about, content that you've read, which we think you might be interested in, that reduced churn by 14%. But actually, by adding these different dimensions, that's how we got to 49%, and that's that incremental value that I was speaking about earlier. So this slide you'll be able to take away. So it's a nice summary. This will be shared, so it's a nice summary of kind of everything that we learned. So I think we've talked about a lot of things in the last 30 minutes. And I think to close, I just want to leave you with a couple of thoughts. There's a lot that we've talked about, and many of the other speakers have talked about, technology enabling more revenue. I think there's a step before that, and admittedly, we did it in the other direction as well. But what I'm hoping that you walk away from this talk is thinking a little bit more about the end result and about how you can demonstrate an empathy for your customers, which maybe doesn't exist or needs to be expanded. It's the combination of a great human-led product and AI-driven customer marketing, on the other hand, that enables positive consumer experiences that drive significant results. Machine learning is only going to make it possible. It's not going to make it valuable. It's empathy for your customers that's going to make it valuable. And for us at the Times and Sunday Times of London, it's how we are continually redefining what it means to be a premium news brand in the 21st century. I'm Mike Migliore. Thanks so much for listening, guys.